Strong Dads wants to thank Quality Auto Mart for joining us as a sponsor. Quality Auto Mart was born in 1985. They are owned and operated by Mark and Nancy Repke. Quality Auto Mart provides all the services, repairs, and maintenance for your vehicle's needs with a 3-year auto parts and labor warranty. They offer complimentary vehicle safety inspection and estimates. Also, they offer a shuttle service and the 4th oil change is always on them. They are located at 7307 on State Road 46 in Batesville, Indiana. Make sure you give them a call at 812-934-2301. All right. Hey, guys, what's going on? Welcome back. Doing another show here with Merle. Merle, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Stop. Don't move. You've got a long blonde hair hanging from
Who
your
could that
earphones. Be? Yeah, I don't know. You got something to tell me?
I thought you were gonna rub my mustache here because it's so long, Anyways, how are you doing today?
Oh, doing pretty good. The concrete's dry finally.
I know. I can
drive on it. So yeah, doing great, man. Beautiful day out there today.
I know it's
just so you know, Linda, I was thinking about that blonde hair that was hanging off your. Kyle was running late for our recording today, and I grossed him out.
Yeah,
I was on our deck, and I mean it is as we speak here in November. It's 70 degrees or so out there, and the sun is as bright as can be. I had my shirt off, just sunning myself.
I pulled up and I started gagging.
You start gagging. That's gross.
Yucky.
Oh man. All right, so what are we talking about today? Definitely not me sunbathing and you having blonde hair growing out of your ears. So what are we talking about? Well,
man, it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, because, there's lots of different arguments that have come about over the years in these areas. And basically what we're talking about today is your time with your kids, okay? As a strong dad, the time that you have with your kids. And a lot of the argument over the years has been about quality versus quantity and all that. And we've written some stuff on that, and we'll get into some of that today. But it's just, I guess to start, how much time do you spend with your kids?
Well, before you do that, you have to tell them what the name of the show is. I love the name.
This is the one title that you actually thought was good.
This is good here.
Do you suck as a dad?
Yes, there it is. All right, we got the title in there now. Do you suck as a dad? That's what we're going to talk about today.
Now, don't start crying, guys. But it is a good question to ask.
I like how you phrase it because it's like you didn't want to say you suck as the dad. You just had to put the question.
No, I'll let you answer
you
the
can
question.
Answer it. Yes.
Yeah, you answer your own question. Part about being a strong dad, though, is to be able to ask those kinds of hard questions and give yourself honest answers.
Yep.
Because as I'm writing this today, I'm reminding myself of there's some areas that I suck at, and there are days or times that I don't do well, and so if you don't really just come to admitting that, you're just living blindly. Yeah. I mean, the best NFL football players out there have to go back and go, I didn't do very well on this play today.
Yeah, exactly.
So
anyway.
Yeah, so, do you spend a lot of time with the kiddos, with the girls?
This is being the profession that I'm in the fire world. This is something I get a lot of. I get to spend a lot of time, especially in the summertime. During the school year, the girls go away, 5 days a week, and then But in the summertime, man, I get to spend a lot of time with them. And that's also it's a double-edged sword, right? Because for me, I a lot of times, we're going to get to this idea of quantity versus quality. A lot of times in my mind, I think of that quality time, I'm like, well, I get a lot of it, right? I get the quantity, right? So there's got to be some quality time in there, right? And so sometimes it's that double-edged sword because there is so much of the time that I get to spend with them. I don't always utilize and actually take advantage of that actual time that I get because I'm probably in the minority when it comes to, men out there that get to be with their kids as much as I am, again, especially in the summertime. So, yes, I get to see my kids a lot, and I love it. It's a huge blessing for my family, for Jen and I, especially as the girls are growing up, dealing with childcare. I get a whole week off at a time. We talk you make fun of me all the time because I get, my EDO weeks. Man, it's a huge blessing that we've had, with our girls growing up. So.
Yeah. Yeah, that's you talked about, it's a blessing and a curse. Your girls, what ages are they right now?
7 and 9.
7 and 9. I wonder what that'll be like when they're, you know, 15 and 17.
Yeah.
You know, like, will they look at this as a blessing that Dad's hanging around, or it'll be interesting just to see what kind of a relationship forms.
You know, that it kind of translates, or that it kind of the tides turn, and they're like, yeah, I don't really want to hang out with Dad anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, so my kids now are in the teen years, and older. So the oldest ones are way out doing their thing. I spent a lot of time because I worked in school, so I had the same schedule that the kids had. And so one thing I always said is, well, no one could ever say I didn't have enough time with my kids.
Right.
The question might be more of, well, what did I do with that time?
Right, exactly.
And, this is not a beat down session. Overall, I felt like Lynn and I were pretty conscious about it and did a good job with being involved with our kiddos. I will say it's gotten harder for me with our younger kids as partially my energy level might be dropped a little bit from what it was. Sure. I don't seem to deal with what I will refer to as silly nonsense as well. Like, I remember when our older kids, when it was their birthday, and we might take them to, at that time, climbing walls were big. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we'd go to climb time and rock time and all these things. And not only was I excited about going, but I was climbing and stuff with them.
Right.
Okay. And we would spend the day, doing that. And now our youngest, for the last 5 years, he loves trampoline parks.
Oh, yeah.
And I dread every moment of that because this is like, my body doesn't bounce.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and so I'm that old fat guy now who's sitting over at a bench and I'm looking at my phone or whatever while he's running around, and I'm not interacting because I'm not as interested, and my body hurts when I do it. So it's a whole different experience now because of the age.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think as we get into the show, it'll be some good time for us to reflect. Like I was telling you, when you sent me the title of the show, man, it just kind of hit me because, as of recently, I was telling Jenny, a couple of days ago, that I just feel like sometimes, as of recently in the season that I'm in, there's a lot of questions that go on with when it comes to my job. And it's really been kind of owning my thoughts, right? And so although I am present and I am there at the house, sometimes I feel like I'm kind of disconnected in a way because my thoughts are not in the present, right? I'm kind of thinking of a lot of stuff going on with my career. So, man, it just kind of hit me like, just kind of right in the face, like, all right, this is a very timely show. So I'm excited to get into it. So as we jump into it, before we do, let's thank our sponsors. I'm going to attempt to do Quality Auto Mart here.
Yeah, you do it, man.
So Strong Dads, we would love to thank Quality Auto Mart for coming alongside of us. Thanks so much for Mark and Nancy Repke for being an awesome sponsor for us. Check them out, all your auto mechanic needs. Really do appreciate them coming alongside of us.
All right. We also want to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions for being a sponsor of the Strong Dads podcast. So for all your household needs, landscaping needs, go down and check out Casey's Outdoor Solutions located outside of Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Okay, so let's give a little bit of background. The idea here is, I think what prompted me in this whole just discussion was a number of people, well, you see this all the time, like on social media, but a number of people recently have been writing things. As we're recording this, we're coming to the end of our fall sports. And so there's been several different comments on social media about their kids and their sports, and especially for the senior kids.
Oh, yeah.
And I read several posts where parents were like, OMG, I can't believe this was our last season. I can't believe how much they've grown up. Where did the time go?
Yeah.
I'm already missing for next year. And I'm just like, and I get all that. Like, I get it. Like, you blink and where did time go?
Yep.
Okay. But the idea here is, it's not like it's a surprise. Right? Time happens, right?
Right.
Growing up happens and all these kinds of things. But I think the challenge here is that I think sometimes I approach my parenting like I used to my final exams in college.
Oh, boy.
Okay.
God, I hope not. I failed a lot of those, Merle.
And the question has to be, why did you fail them, right? And for me, I'll just say, I didn't fail many, so I don't want to go down that road. But I would freak out because all of a sudden it'd be right before the exam. It's not like I didn't know the exam was coming. I mean, you know it's coming from the day one that you get the syllabus, and you know, and you had this thing called a calendar or even, whatever. Now we have phones, okay?
Yeah.
But you know the end is coming, and all of a sudden it's like, a couple days before or the day before the final exam, and you're like, oh my gosh, and you start freaking and panicking, and you start making emotional panic decisions. And so in the last minute in parenting, when we see our kids get to this certain age, like when they're getting to this age of whatever it is, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, and you're all of a sudden, having regrets, like, I wish we would have done this, or I don't have much time left, and it's, okay, take a deep breath.
Yeah.
If we're going to parent well, because this is way more than a final exam for a college course. This is the idea of raising our kids well to prepare them for their life. And so the whole idea here is, let's not allow ourselves to get into emotional parenting by panicking, saying, oh my gosh, I don't have much time left. What am I going to try to do?
Well, so not everyone has not that you needed it, but not everyone has had a chance to redo the whole parenting thing like you and Linda did.
Yeah.
But do you when it comes to these the posts that you're talking about, do you see it more as a surprise, or is it more of like a freaking out because the next stage, right? So like just like you're talking about with the fall sports, so the kids are getting ready to go to college. Like, do you see it more as parents are not surprised, but do you think it is more as the parents are like, holy cow, this next stage in parenting, what is that going to look like for me?
Yeah.
You think more of that?
I think there's more concern about worried that their kid is not prepared for the next thing that's coming, and knowing, or at least believing in their mind, that was on them. Like, I don't even know if my kid's prepared for college or for whatever it is. Okay. And at that point, we try to cram for the exam. We try to do the last minute things of, we give them talks like, okay, you got 2 weeks of school left. You better get your grades up. Well, it's a little late,
Right.
Have you filled out college applications? Have you been, it's like, you're a little late. So I think it's a panic, but the panic is actually more trying to cover our shortcoming as a parent. That if we would have been just more intentional along the way and not act so surprised, and it wouldn't play out quite the way it is. So I think that's a whole lot of what gets us as parents a little bit blown away and panicked.
Yeah. Man, I remember when my girls, golly, I've said this multiple times, if I could just skip that daggone diaper phase, I'd probably have about 4 or 5 more kids.
Yeah.
I remember thinking that, like, man, when Ava and Mia get out of diapers, my life was so much better, right? And it's just like, and then now that they're they get to that toddler age, and now they're kind of like getting in their school age, and it is crazy to think how fast time has seemingly gone, right? But I've almost like wished away that diaper phase because I despised it, right? And I think there are times, depending on what season you're in. I mean, I'm sure you guys out there, I know sports is a huge thing, and different activities your kids are involved, and I'm sure you've said more than one time, like, man, I just can't wait till the season is over with, right? And then all of a sudden now you look back and it's like 2 or 3 seasons have gone by, and it is that perpetual cycle of always wishing the next stage will be over with, the next season will be over with, and man, it is guilty as charged here that I find myself doing that a lot. Man, I can't wait till the summertime for the girls, and then all of a sudden, midway through the summer, I'm like, golly, one of these kids gonna go back to daggone school, right? And I think you just get caught in this cycle of just kind of almost wishing away and kind of like waiting for the next thing because you think that's gonna be easier for you, but man, we've missed this time lapse for these kids.
Yeah. Well, you just said something there that I am guilty of, that it will be easier for me.
Yeah.
The idea of sometimes, as a parent, you start to get into this, I sure will like it a lot more when I've got some more time, when I can
Yeah.
do some of the things I like to do. And that, to be quite honest with you, when we adopted our younger kids, I was 52. And so I was already thinking about the freedom coming up. And then
Yeah.
that was one of the most difficult parts that I wrestled with. Well, what about me? What about my time? And so just being real and honest with the selfishness that's coming out. But let's talk about how we can help our strong dads out there approach the whole parenting thing with their kids so that we can avoid panic, shock, regrets.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, oh man, if I could do it over again. And it doesn't have to be that hard. Okay. I think sometimes we overthink a lot of
Overcomplicate it,
this.
yeah.
And like, I would screw around most of the semester at school, and then I'd make the last 2 weeks insanely difficult on myself.
Right.
Well, I didn't have to do that. And so maybe we can do a little bit of that. I do want to start with Ephesians 6, 1 through 4. And you guys have heard this before, but this is a reminder about just how we approach some of the parenting. And there's some fundamentals in here that we want to grab from some of this, because if we can get some of this right, it'll change how we actually think about the parenting. So Ephesians 6, 1 through 4 says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother." All right. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Okay, so the first part of this, just to kind of grab the nugget out of that, is obey your parents in the Lord. So in the way that the Lord would have you do it, that it's attaching the action of obeying with how the Lord would want you to do it, not with how mommy and daddy want you to do it. Okay, so this is how God has designed this. But then the second part of this is the call out then to us dads. It says, "So fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." And so if we want to try to alleviate some of these problems and challenges, to very early on establish who is Lord of the house. And when we try to establish that Lord of the house is us, this is my house, this is my castle, I'm the king, it's going to fall apart, and typically that falls apart in the teenage years, when your kids see that you're as flawed as anyone else on the earth.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So the idea here early on is getting them to know that in our house, guys, I want you to know who the Lord is. And this is why that Christ is the Lord. I think that just goes such a long way, because not to scapegoat God, but when your kids say, why do we have to do this? When they start pushing back against you and you guys start butting heads like parents and kids can do, it's not totally because you said so. It's because, listen, I'm doing this because I'm trying to be obedient to something far greater than me. And it's teaching your kids very early about humility and the humble heart that it takes to seek out God and follow his way. So anyway, I think that scripture there is really important, and really digging into the idea of what the Lord means there and why it's important to say that. Like, I could just say, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. I mean, that just sort of makes sense, right? But really the important part of that is bring them up in the Lord, and they'll eventually know why.
Yeah, I like it. So, I mean, as we kind of use that verse as kind of like the overarching kind of, going into this idea of what can we do to hopefully, save the shock in all of our kids, getting to that point, and actually, just like you were saying, not having those regrets. Man, I think just kind of what that was talking about, man, teaching our kids about a faith, teaching our kids, man, that there is something bigger than our family, right? That man, what we do in this house is going to have the ripple effect when you go out to school. You're going to be able to hopefully, look a little bit different than the rest of the kids. Hopefully, when you start having kids that come over, they see a mom and daddy in the home together, and how drastically different that's going to look than the vast majority of your friends. Man, I just think this idea of teaching our kids about a faith, about something that's bigger than mommy and daddy, right? That again, just what you were saying, Merle, that our direction that Jenny and I are using towards our girls in the sense of how we want to bring them up. It's not just what Jenny and Kyle think, right? It's so much bigger that there's biblical principles that we want our girls to follow. We want our girls to have in their life, and the big thing is having that faith in something that's bigger than us. And I think it's so important to do, very, very difficult to do. I'll be the first to admit, this is something, Jenny loves to read to the girls, and she takes full ownership of reading to the girls. Man, I'm so grateful that I have a spouse and a partner that wants to do that with my girls and wants to, continue to, dive in deeper about what Jesus' word. But I also, it's a huge responsibility for myself as well. We've talked before, I know you've brought up statistics before about, when the dad is the one that's initiating, hey, let's go to church versus the mom, and the lasting effects that have. And man, sometimes that smacks me in my face, because I'll be the first to admit, sometimes Sunday mornings I'm like, I just want to sleep in, and Jane's like, nope, we're going to church. And man, it's so awesome to have a partner in life that you're trying to raise kids together that have that same goal. Like Jenny and I established this before we started, we're going to have kids. This is something we're going to be about, and it's going to take both of us. I'm not always going to be on my A game. You're not always well. So it's going to take that partnership. So I just think that a great starting point is that teaching the faith for your kids.
Yeah. So let's really grab that, what you're saying. So the idea here, guys, is being intentional, establish it beforehand.
Yes.
The whole idea that I'm shocked when my kid is all of a sudden 18 and graduating high school, like where did that come from, is because I didn't have enough intentionality. If I'm being intentional about how I'm going to parent, I'm actually seeing that day happen long before it happens.
Yeah.
I see my kid graduating, even as a little kid. I see what I'm trying to get a vision for what kind of person they're going to look like and act like and behave like. And so that is the intentional part. And so one of the very first things we do is, of course, we're going to ground our family in a faith in Christ Jesus. Okay. Why? Well, because we'll all look good and pretty. No. Why? Because we want to be in God's nature, and Christ was the example, the human example of God's nature. So that's why I'm like, no, like he showed us exactly how to work with truth and grace and relationships. He showed us all these things, and it's contrary to very much of what my human spirit wants to do, but I want to anchor it to him. Okay. And then from there, like you and Jenny you just mentioned about, before we even have kids. And so when Linda and I do premarital work, before they have kids, we actually say, what are the values going to be for your family? We ask them to establish their family values. And a lot of times they make these huge assumptions like, well, like we just want a good family. Like everyone else does. No, I want you to say them. I want you to write them. I want you to discuss them. Are you on the same page? Like, what if Kyle says, I don't feel like going to church on Sunday, and Jenny says, well, we're going to church on Sunday, and the two of you start fighting about it.
Yeah.
Right in that moment, what did you teach your kids? We're split, right? Like, church is not that big of a deal that we're going to go because mommy and daddy can't figure it out yet. Okay? So the idea that from the very get-go, we're intentional about establishing the family values, right?
Yeah, for any of you guys out there that maybe feel like you've missed the mark on this one, man, I would just encourage you that it's never too late it's going to maybe be a little more difficult to start to kind of establish those family values later on, especially if your kids are of a certain age. But man, I would just encourage you to dig into that and struggle with it. Struggle with your kids trying to figure this out. But man, because if you and your spouse were not on the same page and you started to have kids, or there was no biblical foundation for your family, man, you can't just throw your hands up and say, oh well, they'll just figure it out, right? It is that important to have those family values. So start incorporating. Do a little sit down with your kids and like, hey, these are some things that mom and daddy are talking about. We want to incorporate these into our day-to-day actions. And there's obviously going to be resistance. Anytime there's change, there's always resistance. But man, like, struggle through it together. I think what a great way to build a family connection than to try and figure out these new family values. So I would just encourage anyone, if you feel like you've fallen short in this one, because I think naturally we all fall short at some again, I'll be the first one to admit sometimes I'm like, I really don't want to go to church, right? And so I fall short in that. But man, I just think again, we're just not here to throw our hands up and quit on it. Like, dive deep in it, dig in with your spouse with this.
Yeah, you better be able to answer the why.
Yeah.
Why are we going to church? And if you can answer the why, it'll help you get your butt out of bed to go to church. If you can't answer the why, then you as the parents have to go back and refigure that one out. Because if you can't answer it, there's no way you're going to portray it well to the kids. Okay? So that goes for not just family values, but teaching your kids about work ethics and about manners and about
discipline.
just discipline in general. So establishing those things, getting united with your spouse, and then just from a very young age, we just start how we're going to approach all these different things. I think that just plays a big, big role in us not being shocked or surprised at a particular event as our kids get older, because we will have been thinking one step ahead of them.
I want you to take this from Earl, because you and Linda were the first people I think Jenny and I had heard this ever from doing the marriage stuff at Whitewater. This idea of the different kind of roles in the sense of kind of like the pecking order, right? That you need to establish in your family. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when we talk about do you suck as a dad, right? Dads are not designed to do all things. They oftentimes, when we would walk through this idea of 50-50 parenting, we would give you 50% of the roles and give her 50% of the roles. And basically, as soon as somebody made a mistake, people get angry and start pointing out the shortcoming. And the idea here is, listen, we naturally bring to our family a certain set of gifts, talents, and just who we are, okay? And so early on, it's important that you and your spouse establish kind of what your place is, okay? Now, it doesn't mean you're locked in stone with that. Like, this is not saying, well, my job is to do dishes and yours is to do garbage. No, that's not what we're talking about at all. What we're talking about is what we bring to our kids. Like, we've talked many times about the idea of nurturing versus being a harder disciplinarian. I want that established very well, that Linda's not comfortable dropping the hammer of discipline on our kids.
Sure.
And she'll do it, but it's out of her element, and the kids can tell she's out of her element because she gets very emotional about it, okay? And so early on, it is perfectly fine for her to look at me and say, I need you to deal with your boys on this situation. Okay, like that's fine. So it's those kind of roles that we're making sure, and we want to look for the gifts where each of us can serve best, okay?
Right.
This way our kids kind of know what to expect, and we're on the same page with things, all right? Because I want to spend the least amount of time possible in the negative with my kids. If I'm every day looking for what they're doing wrong, they don't want to be around me anymore. They don't want that time. If Dad's going to be constantly nitpicking everything I do. So I want to know how I jump into that negative role and then how I get out of it and then move on. Because there's so many other great things, recreation, fun, all that good stuff.
Right. Yeah, man, as we kind of move through this, we briefly kind of discussed it at the very beginning of the show, but the difference between, quality versus quantity of time, and you put this down, I think it's spot on that all time matters. Man, just any time that you're going to have spending with your kids is going to be a benefit, right? And I think this is kind of where I struggle a little bit, because I do have so much of the quantity, right? I have so much of it. But man, someone told me a long time ago that your kids will never say, Daddy, why didn't you work more?
Right.
It's just never going to be a question they're going to ask. And I think, man, it just drive home this idea that any time you have with your kids is valuable. But more important, I think, because I do have so much of it, I also have to realize I can't miss those opportunities of having actual, quality time with my kids. But the quantity and quality, they go hand in hand. We have to have the quality of time and the quantity. Like, you have to have them both together, because I just think in general, any time spent with your kids is a value.
Yeah. I have two sons that are in the military. They both have kids. they spend a lot of time away from their kids.
Yeah.
And so it would be very easy for me to go back to this argument that started back in the late 70s and 80s that don't worry, it's not about the quantity of time, it's about the quality. So as long as when you're around, you are like the best dad, that's what they remember. And I will call BS on that all day long, okay?
Yeah.
Yes, that is important, but both of my sons have now recognized that it's not enough. Both my sons, I will tell you, I believe they are fantastic dads. When they are present, they are present. Like they're all in it with their kids, okay?
Yeah.
But they would be the first to tell you, but I'm not there so often, and I'm missing huge sections of time in my kids' life, and my kids are hurt from it, and that's hurting them. And so and I'll just tell you, like both of them are getting out of the military just because like this is not working well for family. And so my point saying that is quantity is important because it creates a whole different opportunity for the level of security that your kids feel. When there's more frequently you being around the house, your sense of strength as a dad creates, if you're healthy. Now, if you're a jerk, it's a whole different story.
Right.
All right. But if you're a healthy dad, your presence creates a sense of calm and security that helps bring your kids down. And helps to just keep them calm. And so I think that's really important. Just that quantity can be really important versus, well, dad's only here every other weekend, but when he's here, he's fun. That's not enough. They need the daily security that a dad can provide through his strength. And the same thing with mom. I mean, we see that as just as well. But we are talking to dads here today.
So kind of on this idea of quantity versus quality, I'm sure there's got to be a dad out there that's listening that has gone through a divorce and has to split parent, time with their spouse. When they look at their situation and know that the quantity is not there, what would be maybe a takeaway for that dad dealing with and struggling with this idea that I only really have, when I do have the time, I have to make sure it is that very quality time, right? What would you kind of, a takeaway for that dad out there struggling with the quantity versus quality?
I deal with this very frequently, okay? Yeah. Well, helping dads through divorce situations. Old school thinking would be a dad would be lucky if he could get like an 80-20 split with time. And so it'd be like on a Wednesday night visit, and then every other weekend we get with daddy, okay? And that way falls way, way short from creating the healthiest balance that we need to raise kids. And it ends up coming back to haunt the mom, the dad, and the kids because we don't have a good distribution of the responsibilities and how they're going to be covered. So oftentimes in that situation, dad becomes the play toy. He's only there a little bit, so it's not like he's going to do anything that's going to mar that time, okay?
Right.
And mom becomes overwhelmed because she's trying to be fun like dad, but yet she has to carry out the daily work of everything else. And so she becomes overwhelmed. So my push for that always providing dad is healthy. And I want to say that very clearly. I have a couple situations where dad's not a very good dude sometimes. Okay.
Right.
I'm not saying he's bad and evil. What I'm saying is sometimes, he doesn't parent well. He's got his own issues. And if he's coming in and spending a lot of time in a negative way, then I want to put the brakes on that and go, okay, what do we need to do? Do we need to help with some parenting, relationship building between dad and kiddo? But if we can have a dad who's healthy, then we want to shoot for 50-50 time. Okay, because that way the kids get to see the good and the bad of both parents, and then it forces the parents to become much more in alignment with how they're going to actually parent. Because dad's dealing with homework just like mom's dealing with homework. Dad's providing, opportunities for fun. Mom gets to provide opportunities for fun. So it just works out so much better, and so that's my big push. So if I have a dad who's not in that or they're going through a custody situation, always I'm first saying, well, we're going for 50-50 here, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'll tell you, there's a number of guys that they don't want 50-50. And I have to question them, like, well, why don't you want 50-50? What's going on here? They're your kids. Are you a good dad? Well, I work and stuff. Well, she works too.
Right.
No. All right. Now, and the reason why they don't want 50-50 a lot of times is because they know how hard this is getting ready to be.
Yeah.
It's going to be difficult.
Well, it goes back to that statement you were saying, what's easier for me, right? So when
Yeah.
my kids get out, when they're with mom, it's going to be really easy for me if they're with them all the time. And I just think, just like you said, man, why wouldn't you want that time with your kids? Merle, I know you've spoken a lot about this idea and a struggle that you've had with anxiety and depression. What would be some recommendations you would have for dads? So when they are around their kids, but they're dealing with a lot of depression, maybe some stress, some anxiety, whether it could come from obviously a multitude of different places, but what would be a recommendation you would have for dads that are, that are possibly dealing with something like this when they are around their kids?
Way too often, the reason that I boil down to finally, I almost never get a dad just come out and tell me this. But when I'm working with a dad and I find out that we have a stressed relationship with him and the kids, I often find it's because dad's simply not good at or comfortable in the dad role. Okay. I mean, maybe he's a little awkward. Maybe he's always consumed with his job, and because that's what he's good at, right? He's good at his job. And so I just want to go in my workshop and I want to work on something because I get my tools, I get my projects, I know that. But this kid thing, oh my gosh, like this totally drives me crazy.
Right.
And so they withdraw from it. And so if there's a level of anxiety or you notice yourself moody when you're around your kids, I'm saying get some help, man. Get some help. You have a window of your dad window, right? And I say dad window because mom has a lot of the first 2 years, okay? First 2 to 3 years, just due to the nurturing aspects of that. But around 2 to 3 years of age is when dad can really play in so much more significantly. So I'll just say, for the sake of being easy here, from 3 to 18 is kind of the dad window. Okay. You have 15 years.
Yeah.
You have 15 years basically to really create the memories, have the impact, but also create the wounds. And so it's that 15 years. It's short enough that you'll go, wow, where did that go? But long enough to say, when is this going to be over? Right? And it's right in that weird spot. So my whole point is, if you're struggling with being a dad because it's hard, you don't quite get it, the kids kind of drive you crazy, get some help. Get some help. All right. There's lots of different ways. Come in to see us at Rock Solid Families. I help dads all the time with okay, let's talk about how we can approach this a little differently. Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do have to see through your kids' eyes. That's getting harder for me. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, like petty little high school stuff, I would just kind of go like, I shared with you a couple weeks ago how I did not handle my daughter's situation well.
Right.
And I quickly was like, I'm starting to really lose the desire to look at it through their eyes.
Yep. Man, I love that. Just, I know I've heard you say this before, and I know I was talking about how no kids are going to ever say, I wish, daddy didn't work as much. There's not a man out there that's worth their waiting anything that would ever say, man, I just don't really care if I'm a good dad, right? Or I don't want to be an involved dad, man. I would just, man, that window of opportunity you're talking about, Merle, man, it just kind of smacks you in the face. And I've talked about this before, whether it be on this show or just in casual, social environments. Like, my goal in raising my kids is, yes, there is the goal to raise my girls to love the Lord and to actually invest in that and have a servant mindset and actually want to forgive people when they're wrong. But man, my goal and Jenny and I's goal in raising a girl is to have them raise kids. And then those kids raise kids that have that same biblical principles. Man, I think when you can take that step back and have kind of and it's very difficult to do because we're not God, have more of that heavenly perspective, right? That what's going on, the day-to-day stuff, yes, it does matter. But man, having a long-term vision for what you want for your kids, I think is so impactful because, again, we talk all the time in here, the generational effect that's going to have is going to be huge. Huge changes can actually take place when you do incorporate these family values that we were talking about, when you do realize that your quality and your quantity time, both of those do matter. Like, when you're actually invested in your kids, those things do matter. They're going to have a lasting legacy for you.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, guys, hopefully the idea that you came out of here with today was that you don't suck as a father, but that you got some things to work on. Just like Kyle and I admitted here today, I mean, there's just a constant battle of trying to balance the forces that pull on us from life and job situations, our own personalities and interests, and then our kids. And so we desired to have kids, but sometimes when they're confusing us or when we don't quite get it, we retreat into other things. And so I would just challenge you to, first off, recognize your intention of being a father, being intentional about it. Like, listen, I've got this 15-year window, and it doesn't mean you're not a father for life. You are, but you got 15 years essentially to really get it done. And that's where either all the good or all the damage is really that's where 95% of the damage is going to take place. Okay. Or the growth is going to take place. So being intentional about it, understanding what you bring to the table as a dad, and also your shortcomings. And at that point, really starting to cover those things in a way that honors the family values that you and your wife developed before you ever had kids. And if you didn't do that, start it today. We do that all the time with couples. We talk about, okay, look, so we assumed that we are valuing the same thing. Today, we are actually going to do an exercise here where we are going to write down and discuss what this home will stand on.
I like it. Yeah, man. I hope that, if nothing else, sparks some good conversation between you and your spouse. Thanks so much for continuing to tune in every week with us. We love putting out content for you. Share the heck out of it. Give us a 5-star rating on all the platforms. Thanks so much for Quality Auto Mart and Casey's Outdoor Solutions for coming alongside of us. Continue to be intentional with that time with your kids, man, because it is going to be of great benefit.
All right. So, again, thanks for listening to Strong Dads. Go out there and be a strong dad. Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Casey's offers a wide selection of plants, landscaping materials, home and garden decor, and gifts for every occasion. Casey's is committed to providing exceptional service, a unique shopping experience, and value to every customer. Stop in and see what makes Casey's so unique. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, or call 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home.